Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FanDuel Punch Out. I'm Big Italy 42 here with Josh Shepardson at BChad50, and we're going to give you everything you need to know about FanDuel tonight on this huge slate. You got the $25 Grand Slam, lots of great contests tonight. So, without further ado, Josh, you ready to get into this?
Absolutely, man. And that $25 Grand Slam, that's your favorite contest, right, Justin?
Yes, it is. And I promised you that I'd save you first place tonight. So I'm shooting for second. So the rest of you can finish third through whatever the rest of the money is. And that wouldn't be a bad payout anyway, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, here we go. Let's try to help you guys take this thing down this week. Starting at pitcher, you've got your obvious options up top. You mentioned for the show. If you're looking at Vegas odds, Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer are both monstrous favorites. Clayton Kershaw, not off to the best start of his career, but he's still Clayton Kershaw. I'm sure he'll get things turned around. Facing a fairly tough Colorado lineup, but it is in LA, so I think he'll be fine if you want to pay. Same with Max Scherzer against that awful Phillies lineup. Around these top options, there were some guys that we were talking about. So give me your take on some top options outside of those two.
Well, let me start by saying we talked about Corey Kluber before the pod, and for $10,700, like I love Corey Kluber, good matchup with Minnesota, but when factoring the Vegas odds, you got to pay that extra $300 for Kershaw. I mean, it's $300. You're getting a much better Vegas line. You're getting a National League ballpark, and you're getting the Phillies, which are basically a slight upgrade from a AAA roster right now.
Slight.
So, I mean, I'm rolling Kershaw of the big arms, but the name that we both agreed on in the sub 5-figure category as a top arm in cash games, namely, is Sonny Gray. He catches Kansas City. He's this fairly big betting favorite, and you gotta like when you've got a pitcher opposing Jeremy Guthrie, mostly because Jeremy Guthrie's terrible and he's going to give up runs. There's a reason that Gray's a favorite. The A's have the left-handed bats to exploit Guthrie, so I expect Gray to get a win, which is obviously of the utmost importance here at FanDuel. And you're saving $2,400 from Kershaw, $1,600 from Scherzer. That's big savings that you can pour into your hitters and still feel pretty good about getting that W. The other big names we don't care for, Julio Teheran, fly ball pitcher at Rogers Center facing the designated hitter. That has disaster written all over it. As much as we both love Johnny Cueto and Michael Wacha, not going to take either of them with them pitching against one another. That has no decision written all over it. And so our next name actually digs a little bit deeper, and Justin and I are in complete agreement on this one. And that's Jimmy, call me James on FanDuel Nelson, 6,800. The price point is fantastic. He was actually an underdog at last check, but he's facing a Pirates lineup that's off to a slow start, striking out a lot, and he's backed by PNC Park, which is a much more pitcher-friendly ballpark than he pitches in at home. Great AAA numbers last year. His ERA estimators such as FIP, XFIP, and Sierra liked his production in 2014 a lot better than his ERA did. Something's got to give, basically, and it looked like it did in Game 1. 7 scoreless innings from him. He was brilliant. He can miss bats. He can keep the ball on the ground. He doesn't walk a lot of hitters. So I really like Jimmy Nelson at $6,800. He's going to be the guy that I own the most across cash games and GPPs probably.
Yeah, completely with you there. And like you mentioned with his numbers, I mean, mowed down the Pirates the first game and now facing them again now in a better situation, like you said, in PNC. And this is a team that's already been shut out 3 times. They've been held to 2 runs twice, and this is in 9 games. So only 4 games where they've scored more than 2 runs. So definitely a beatable offense right now, really struggling. So I'm with you there. We'll throw out one more tournament name here, Andrew Hutchison against that terrible Atlanta lineup. Still not buying the hot start. This is a bad lineup. Hutchison, a nice big strikeout guy, 23.4% strikeout rate last year. And a little bit fly ball tendencies there for him. But and that concerns you a little bit, but not a lot of big bats on the Atlanta side that you're worried about.
Exactly. And that's why I really liked that call from you headed into the show today. Some people will probably fade Hutchison because of that fly ball tendency and the fact that he's pitching at the Rogers Center, but when you catch a Braves offense that really only has one bat, who we'll get to in a little bit, there just aren't the big bats to take advantage of his fly ball tendencies and really punish him for it. And the strikeout upside is fairly immense with Hutchison. So I like that call. I definitely like it a lot more in GPPs than than cash games, as you said, because there is that fairly low floor if he does struggle with some bad fly ball luck. But and the ceiling's high enough that you got to roll the dice with that price point and some GPPs.
Definitely. Moving on here to catcher. There's only a few guys that we really like until we see maybe some lineups with some guys in better spots and value opening up. But Travis d'Arnaud at $3,200 been batting second. He's got a solid matchup today against David Phelps, who is going to be making his first start this season. Wasn't very good last year. 356 WOBA allowed to righties. d'Arnaud off to a nice start right now. Just one home run, but batting 10 for 34. Like I said, batting second. It's rare you're going to find a catcher with his amount of power batting second against a good pitcher. So I'm taking advantage there. Also, Jonathan Lucroy is another guy we both like. And outside of that, not a whole lot else like. Anybody else you want to highlight here?
The only other name that I like without seeing lineups yet is Stephen Vogt down at $2,900. Guthrie is absolutely pitiful against left-handed batters. Vogt's off to a very good start. Hits righties much better than lefties, so he looks pretty good. And if you want to... if by chance, and I was so excited when I saw the price point until I realized Kershaw was on the hill. If by chance Grandal is catching Kershaw, he makes for a strong play, but it looks like A.J. Ellis is going to be his personal catcher this year. So unless they announce the lineup before the early games, go ahead and check Grandal off your list of players. But if the Dodgers do announce a lineup with Grandal by chance, which is, again, unlikely, he would make for a good play, and he's a guy that would be faded largely because, as I'm sharing right now, I don't expect him to play. So if he's in the lineup, that's going to be a surprise, and that would make him a decent GPP swerve play. But don't expect him to be in the lineup, but he's really the only other name that I'm looking at with Stephen Vogt.
Yeah, absolutely with you there. All right, next up, first base. You've got your big bats. Obviously, you're going to be looking towards Edwin Encarnacion against fly ball tendencies of Julio Teheran. You've got Paul Goldschmidt and Adrian Gonzalez both hot right now. I'm not going out of my way to pay those prices, but in GPPs, obviously huge upside. Lucas Duda, guy that you mentioned before the show, everyone knows he's swinging a hot bat. Make yourself a little duo with him and d'Arnaud, maybe catch your first base. They've been batting second and third. Outside of that, there's some guys who, like a guy that you mentioned that's really cheap here, David Ortiz against Ubaldo Jimenez, who got off to a good start, but I'm not buying it. I'm sure many others are not buying it. Walks too many batters, and he's not going to maintain that for long.
No, and I mean, Ortiz hits in a great spot for run production, and if Messi Ubaldo shows up and he can't find the strike zone, there's going to be ducks on the pond for Ortiz, and we know what he does. He drives them in. So I like the price point on Ortiz. One name that we kind of cringed going over earlier was $3,500 Brandon Moss, but Mike Palfrey is so bad. You got to get some exposure to him, and at $3,500, Moss gives you that GPP home run upside that you look for. So I like Moss a little bit at $3,500, and another home run only chasing option is Chris Davis. Joe Kelly had an acceptable WOBA against left-handed batters last year, but his walk rate was hovering around 10%, strikeout rate's low, so he gives up a lot of contact, gives up walks, keeps the ball on the ground, but if Chris Davis can lift him, I mean, we know what kind of raw power Chris Davis has, and Kelly just doesn't miss a lot of bats, so I like Davis a little bit as a GPP pick. Don't love him because Fenway is much better for amplifying doubles with the Green Monster to get peppered the opposite way for these left-handed batters. But it does actually reduce home runs by a lot to a left-handed batter. So don't love Davis, but he is kind of that contrarian pick, if you will, if you're chasing some power. And you had a good name, and we kind of foreshadowed earlier when we were talking pitchers. Why don't you give us the other first baseman that you really like?
Freddie Freeman. Talked about Hutchinson's fly ball tendencies. He tends to give up, like we said, lots of hard contact through the air. And Freddie Freeman, the one big bat in that Atlanta lineup that could expose him with those. He hangs a curveball, throws something over the plate that doesn't belong. Freddie Freeman's the one guy that can punish him quickly. So we like that. And another guy that you had mentioned here, nice and cheap, Ike Davis, down at $2,700.
Yeah, poor Ike. I forgot about him, actually. I was so excited to share his price point with you. And he gets Guthrie as a left-handed batter and hitting fifth. I mean, that price point is absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, good call saving my bacon there.
Yeah, hey, I wasn't going to let him go under the radar there. That was a good call. Next up, second base. If you want the stolen base upside, which I love to have in GPPs along with power, Of course, you're looking at D. Gordon at $4,200 today in a fine matchup, I guess you could say, against Bartolo Colon, who's somehow pitching beyond his years, literally and figuratively. So he's a guy that you're not necessarily going out of your way to target, but you're not intimidated of him. And D. Gordon's got that upside. Altuve against a righty, granted not a very good righty, but he's pretty pricey, so that's a pass for me. You mentioned that Neil Walker's still cheap, but I think the guy that you and I are going to be targeting the most here is going to be Dustin Pedroia at $3,400.
Yeah, this comes back to just distrusting Ubaldo Jimenez. Maybe some people will be scared off by that first start. I certainly hope so. I hope that Pedroia's ownership is low so that I can reap the rewards of bad Ubaldo showing up and the number 2 hitter, PD, coming through at $3,400. At the same price, I like Kipnis again a bit. I want more of Mike Palfrey. I mean, Mike Palfrey's not good. He basically lost a rotation spot this spring for the Twins and has been forced into the rotation due to the suspension of Irvin Santana. So anytime you can get a guy that couldn't win a spot in a really bad rotation, I'd say you're in a pretty good spot. So I like Kipnis a bit, but Petey's the guy that I like the most at $3,400. Looking a little bit pricier, Cano against a righty at home. I like $3,900 as long as he remains under $4,000 and he's facing a righty. Not a bad price point for Cano. And having red hot Nelson Cruz behind him doesn't hurt either.
Not at all. All right, moving on here to third base, where I will always start this segment off by talking about Kyle Seager at home against a righty, because Kyle Seager is at home against a righty. Hope you're not sick of hearing that. You're going to hear it every time. $3,500 tonight. Got to target some Kyle Seager.
Yeah, price point's awesome. Lineup spot's awesome. He has a big platoon split, and that is favorable tonight because he gets the right-handed pitcher. So, love Seager. I like his opponent at the hot corner, Adrian Beltre. J.A. Happ, left-handed. Beltre hammers lefties. Not a bad matchup. Really the only name in that Rangers lineup, though, that is scary. So forgot to mention Happ as a possible GPP play because it is such a lefty-dominant Rangers lineup. But the one name that I do like there is Adrian Beltre. One name that I forgot to tease going into the pod was Josh Donaldson. 4,100 is expensive, but it gets back to that fly ball tendencies from Julio Teheran. Maybe you pair Donaldson and the big bat behind him, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and you've got some serious home run potential. But really, those are the names that I'm looking at third base. Mike Moustakas at $3,100 against a righty. Like, if you're not using Gray, price point's pretty good, lineup spot's good, but I just think I'd rather spend a few $100s more and bump myself up into that Seager-Beltre range.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'd rather give myself a little bit more power than a couple single and a run upside with Moustakas. A little bit of power, but let's be honest, it's nowhere near the pedigree of these other guys that are a few $100s more. All right, next up is shortstop, where things are pretty ugly tonight. If you want the ultimate contrarian play, you could go with Troy Tulowitzki against Clayton Kershaw. Not saying I'm recommending that, just saying he's still a hell of a hitter against lefties. If Xander Bogaerts gets a decent spot, I like him. As you notice, you and I both like the Boston bats, but Bogaerts been batting around 7th recently, so kind of pricey there. Jed Lowry is the guy that you had mentioned there before the pod. It's $3,400. Got in a nice spot against Jared Weaver. And where else are you looking here in this ugly position tonight?
Jimmy Rollins, $3,600. I mean, you're paying for lineup slot, leadoff. You're paying for facing Kyle Kendrick, who's terrible. And unfortunately, he doesn't have like sky high upside, but he does have slightly above average power. He can steal a base. So I mean, there's enough to like there that you can bite the bullet and spend $3,600. If Eric Ibar remains slotted leadoff and Cole Calhoun's out, I like Ibar against Roberto. Don't call me Fausto Carmona Hernandez. $3,000 is a good price. As Drupal Cabrera's been hitting third for the Rays. $2,900, not the worst price for a 3-hitter, especially at a position that is just so terrible. And you brought up a couple names from the Indians. Why don't you highlight them real quick?
All right, and this is going to be based on lineup position, obviously. If Micah Vilas or Jose Ramirez is once again slotted in the 2-hole, I love one of those two guys. They're cheap. They're $2,600 and $2,400. I think a lot of that is contingent on Michael Brantley's status, whether or not we'll see Jerry Sands out there in the outfield. But if Brantley sits, I won't be surprised to see one of these guys batting in the 2-hole, and especially Ramirez. I mean, he's got a little bit of power as well. He steals bases every once in a while, so I don't mind punting with one of those two guys if they get a good lineup spot.
No, and I agree completely.
All right, moving on to the outfield, where you kind of already touched on this one a little bit. Jose Bautista, the top bat of the day in the outfield. Obviously, you can consider Mike Trout also at 5,700. You're going to want good pitching tonight, and it's going to be tough to fit him in. But Bautista, already talked about Tehran, already talked about him being at the Rogers Center, already talked about Bautista's power. I mean, all the factors in his favor tonight.
Yeah, I mean, when I talked about Donaldson, I gave you a Law and Order teaser where you could see the ending coming a mile away. You knew that Bautista was going to get the highlight. And, I mean, at $5,100, people might shy away from him just because of the price point. Which is great because he can easily deliver for that price point, and we have highlighted enough bargain plays where it is very feasible to slot him in your lineup. So I love Joey Bats. You mentioned Nelson Cruz is a guy who is absolutely scalding the ball right now. We know he's got top shelf power. $4,800 in a righty-righty matchup. He might actually serve as a contrarian pick tonight, which is a rare thing for a hot hitter like him. Bryce Harper's a guy that I'm eyeballing hard. $4,200 against Sean O'Sullivan, who I call David Buchanan because the Phillies have about 3 right-handed pitchers who are terrible and all belong in Triple-A. He gets one of them tonight in O'Sullivan. Harper has been he's been hitting in favorable lineup slots. He hit third with Jason Worth out. Worth is back in and makes for a nice play at $3,400 as well. So I like those Nationals bats against O'Sullivan, namely the outfield bats. Brantley was a guy that we touched on. As you said, and this is my feeling as well, if Brantley's in the lineup, it's because he's healthy and Terry Francona and the Indians have no concerns about re-injury of the back. So if he's in the lineup, I'm using him. And I think that there are a number of gamers who will think, back injury, what if he takes a hard swing and he leaves the game? Just take him right off their board. Well, that's good, because if he's off their board, it means low ownership of the number 3 hitter against Mike Palfrey, and I want that. I want that bad. And at $4,100, it's a very good price point.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. Definitely an ultimate contrarian play tonight for all those reasons you indicated. A couple other guys, if you're not targeting a pitcher on the other side, Lorenzo Cain hitting the ball extremely well right now. He's $3,500. So you could definitely consider him. You already talked about Jason Worth there at $3,400. And Matt Joyce, if he's batting cleanup or anywhere near there, once again, nice cheap price tag at $3,200. And outside of that, any real cheap guys you like? Because I know there's one little duo that we're interested in.
Mookie Betts at $3,100. We talked about the Red Sox bats earlier. Get yourself a 3-man stack of $3,700 Ortiz, $3,400 Pedroia, $3,100 Mookie Betts. That is a bargain stack that has huge upside. Really like him a lot. He's the cheap name that I like the best. I'll give you one cheap name that I don't like, and then I'll let you get to your man crush here in a moment. The cheap name I don't like is Chris Davis. $2,600. He is facing a lefty, which would usually be reason to own him, but PNC Park is absolutely death on right-handed power. You really have to put a charge into the ball to send it in the seats, and Davis has very good raw power, but I'm not taking that chance. The ballpark factors just don't line up. I think some people will see the price point, get really excited, and he might even be slightly over-rostered because of that, but I'm not going to be using Chris Davis tonight, and it pains me to say it because I would love to be able to slot that $2,600 player in there. If I am going to do that, I'm going to look at Chris Carter in a righty-righty matchup against fly-ball-happy Jared Weaver at home. Carter has that top-shelf home run power. I'll cede the floor to you for your top value pick in the outfielder. Value pick possibilities, because you named 2, and you're right on both.
All right, well, I will say this. I do love some Chris Carter. He's been terrible this year, but at $2,600, he's got double-dong upside still. So I think he's definitely worth a shot. I mean, he's just as likely to go for 4 as he is to hit a home run. But if he hits you that home run, going to be low owned, not going to cost you much. So I like that call. Moving on here to if David DeJesus or Kevin Kiermaier, whichever's batting leadoff, it should be one of them. If you ask me for the 1,000th time, it should be Kiermaier every single night. And if it's Kiermaier, I'll love to roster him, and I will in most of my lineups. If it's DeJesus, I'll give myself some exposure, but he's no Kevin Kiermaier in my book.
No, and $2,900 for Kiermaier. That's an awesome price. And De Jesus only 2,800. Both are that nice glue guy. Kiermaier has the higher ceiling, but you can't go wrong, especially if you're looking for these value plays. I mean, if you're owning Clayton Kershaw or Max Scherzer tonight, you have to get some of these sub $3,000 bats in your lineup because the salary cap restraints won't allow you to get anything but them in your lineup. And these two are great opportunities to save money while not sacrificing too much in the offensive side of things.
Completely agree there. And with that, that's going to wrap things up for us. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com, and we will see you all tomorrow.